Hi folks, welcome to week 11. This week we'll be talking about the institutions of families, education, and healthcare. So, what exactly is a family? I mean, we all have families, but how do we actually define them? In sociology, we define a family as a social group bound together to pool economic and social resources. In other words, it's a group of people that share what they have with the others in the group to make life easier for everyone in the group. In the United States, our hegemonic nuclear family is expected to be a heterosexual adult couple with one or more children, whose goal primarily is child raising. The hegemonic extended family, then, are the people related by blood or marriage to those in the nuclear family. The hegemonic ideal isn't the reality for lots of people, though. There are many single-parent families, families where the extended family is far more involved in child raising, even taking on the primary caregiver role in some cases. LGBT families, couples without children, and families of choice. Family of choice is probably a newer term for many of you, but I suspect many of you can think of examples of this relationship. It's also sometimes called intentional or found families. This is when you create family-like ties with people who are not related by blood or marriage. Often these are people who are very close to family, but who are treated as family to the point of being called aunt, uncle, or cousin. They might be a parent's best friend or a kid you grew up with and have known your entire life. Some friendships become this close that where that person is as closer than biological family and is considered family. Created families are a very common occurrence within the LGBT community. It's who you celebrate holidays with, who you go to for support, and who you support in return. Many LGBT people have strained relationships with their biological families, also known as families of origin. Some may have been cut off from their families altogether. It's not uncommon for older community members to take younger folks under their wing and provide support and guidance, and for those younger folks to provide care and assistance as the older person ages. Similar age people often form close sibling-like bonds that persist throughout their lives. Some of these families might be informal and never use familial terms. Others might be more formalized relationships, as is found in ballroom and drag culture, where there are family groups known as houses that include mothers, daughters, sisters, and cousins. Pause here for a minute and think about what chosen family you might have now, or have had. When we're thinking about identities, what identities are often shared within families? Family history, obviously, in most cases race, class, and ethnicity as well. These shared identities help create stronger bonds among family members. Differences, by contrast, create fiction. As mentioned earlier, differing sexuality or gender identity is often a source of friction in families. Gender and gender social role socialization and expectations can be a large source of friction as well. Differing levels of education attainment can create fiction, particularly when it comes to expectations for children. Finally, there are power dynamics at work within families. Who can make demands, who can put their foot down on issues, and who needs to comply. Gender and age play into that problem, particularly as children become more independent. I want to talk a bit specifically about interracial families. Most people still form partnerships with people of their same race, but interracial relationships have become more common, particularly since Loving v. Virginia struck down miscegenation laws and helped make those relationships more socially acceptable. We know that racism is prevalent, and that affects both partners in an interracial relationship. Externally, both people are likely to face discrimination and social disapproval for their choice in partner. Internally, socialized conceptions about race can create problems between a couple. Love doesn't automatically wipe away the assumptions, stereotypes, and ignorance we often have about other racial groups. Families often do not react well to interracial relationships either. There's a lot of distrust between pretty much all racial groups in the United States, in part because of the way marginalized races have been treated, and in part because of how the owning class has often used race as a way to divide people. So we focus on disliking other racial groups rather than disliking those in power. This distrust between racial groups is heightened when it comes to family members. In some cases, the same race partner is seen as being disloyal to their own racial group. In other cases, there is concern about the harm that might befall them from the different race partner, whether real, particularly in the form of microaggressions, or imagined through stereotypes. We've talked about reproductive labor before when we discussed gender, but I think it's important to revisit here. In many ways, what is defined as reproductive labor is at the core of the family as an institution, pooling resources for the betterment of the family. It's also the source of much of the gendered friction within a family. Historically, those responsible for the reproductive labor has been women, and this is still very much the expectation, although the degree of which varies somewhat depending on cultural background. This labor is often unnoticed and unappreciated, and has certainly been a point of contention not only within families, but within the feminist movement at large. While there's been some change, men do help out more with household labor than in the past, particularly younger men. The workload is still very unevenly divided. This graph here is based on a survey of heterosexual couples living together from 2019, showing the division of household tasks. Dark green indicates that only the female partner does the task. Light green indicates only the male partner does the task. Dark gray indicates they do the task somewhat equally, and light gray means that it's not applicable for some reason. I'd like you to look specifically at the tasks I've highlighted in red. These are the sort of work that's included in reproductive labor, the work that needs to be done almost every day. It's very clear that women are involved in doing that work in almost every area, whereas men are involved in that work on average in just under half of the instances. The one that really stuck out for me is childcare. Men took on sole childcare in only 7% of the households. 92% of the time, women were either solely responsible or frequently involved. This is reflected in how we talk about childcare. How often have you heard of a father babysitting his children? How many jokes exist about men's cluelessness around childcare or about their own children? Of course, what this looks like varies across class lines. It's long been a sign of social status to be a single-income family, where only one adult, almost always the male in a heterosexual couple, goes out to work, and his female partner is responsible for maintaining the home. For wealthier families, this usually means hiring outside help and managing household workers, rather than doing the actual labor. In more recent years, this has also included the ability to buy time and labor-saving devices. Middle-class families have also had access to most of these labor-saving devices, but the family usually cannot afford to outsource all or most of the labor. Working-class women have almost always not only done the labor to maintain a household, but have also leveraged their skills to help supplement the family income. In the past, this has meant doing laundry or sewing for others, or crafting items to sell. More recently, it has also included multi-level marketing sales, like Avon, LuLaRoe, or Pampered Chef. Poorer women have often had to work outside the home to generate enough income to keep the family's basic needs met. This has resulted in what's been labeled a double-day life, where one labors for someone else during the day, then comes home and performs all the reproductive labor tasks at home. As more women have joined the workforce, either for personal satisfaction or financial necessity, more and more women have found themselves in this double-day predicament. Race factors into this labor pattern as well. Slavery and immigration have often forced women into domestic labor for little or no money, and often poor working conditions. This pattern continues today. Most domestic work is done by recent immigrant women, particularly those with poor English skills or low levels of education. Finally, I want to introduce the idea of the cult of domesticity. This is a 19th century concept that gained immense traction among the upper and middle classes, and is linked to the era of true womanhood that we discussed in our sexuality lecture. The idea that there are two spheres in life, a private sphere and a public sphere. The public sphere was reserved for men, and the private sphere for women. The private sphere included home life, the rearing of children, and moral and spiritual guidance. We see this echoed today in how women are still primarily responsible not only for the reproductive labor, but the mental load necessary for maintaining a household. Women are judged for the cleanliness and appeal of their homes and the behavior of their children, while men are usually exempt from judgment in all but the most extreme cases. The next video goes into more detail about the cult of domesticity, and then we'll start examining education.